So the purpose of the recording is that I'll be sending this to you along with the companion notes and whatever else we come up with along the way by end of business tomorrow, so that you guys can have this to refer back to if you need to. You are welcome to share this as much as you like, but I won't be sharing it publicly. So I'll make it available on YouTube just to anybody who has the link. So we can keep this fairly well contained, so you feel free to speak freely. So as we begin, I always like to do a land acknowledgement. So I am currently on Kalapuya land. I am grateful that I am able to live, work, and learn on land that was taken from the Kalapuya people. And we are all on stolen land. I think that's important to remember. So today we're talking about procrastination. It's a big topic. We only have 90 minutes to solve procrastination. We're not going to be able to do that, but we're going to talk about like the impacts of procrastination on those that we serve, and the tools that I teach to help people resolve that. So to start off with, as a form of introduction, let's run through a couple of things: your name, what you do, and how you know if someone you're working with is battling procrastination. So my name is Hannah, and I'm a financial coach, holistic financial coach, or financial wellness coach, whichever way you want to think about it. And the way that I know that people are battling with procrastination is if they say that they need help managing their time. That's secret code word for procrastination. So let's see, I'll pick Sumesh to go next. And then Sumesh, you can pick whoever goes next.
Sumesh, joining in from India. I work with a startup in India here, and at the same time thinking about looking at ways to start working with children in my area. How I get to know if people around me or me is procrastinating is, if deadlines are missed, and if I'm like working on something the last minute, or somebody says, I need some more time, let me get back to you, I'm almost done. That kind of, when I listen to that kind of lines, I know that there is a procrastination issue.
Perfection. So who goes next, Sumesh?
Jocelyn? Jolene, I'm sorry.
Jolene, if you're here. Okay, let's go to Jessica then.
Jessica.
Jolene might not be here, so.
Hello, I'm Jessica. I'm a family resource navigator. I work with clients directly referred from the Child Welfare Department of DHS. And I would say I pretty much always assume there's a procrastination issue with all clients. I kind of have to work on the reverse, and if I see signs that people are actually moving towards their goals, then I can see that maybe they aren't procrastinating. But it's pretty much standard across the board that they know what needs to be done and they're reluctant to move in that direction. So
yeah,
pretty standard.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Jolene, if you're here, you're welcome to introduce yourself. Sounded like she got an important phone call just as we began, so we'll just move on. She can come in and introduce herself whenever she feels comfortable doing that. So I'm going to switch over to slides here in a minute. This is, some of you have been on the discussions before. The discussions, at least at the beginning of the time, are fairly flexible. This is an actual class. So as I switch over to slides, you're going to be little squares, tiny little squares for me. Kind of the way that this works best, especially with little intimate groups like this, is if you have something to say, just unmute and talk, right? Interrupt me, it's perfectly fine. I can try to keep an eye on chat, but typically if I'm just administering a class like this by myself, I'm into the slides and I'm in the group and I'm not paying attention to chat. So this is important, that if a question pops up in your head, the best time to ask it is the minute that you're thinking about it, because somebody else here is probably thinking about it too. So we need, while this is a class, it is important that this is also your class. So it is important that we weave some discussion time in as well. I'm gonna check email real quick last time to make sure anybody's not somehow not know how to use Zoom, which happens sometimes still. So let's hop into slides real quick. Mhm. So yes, we're going to be talking about procrastination and its a best friend, crisis, as well. So I did mention that I will be sending you guys companion notes by the end of business tomorrow, but the notes that you take right now are going to be way, way more impactful than the notes that I will be sending you. So please feel free to take notes and ask questions. This lesson is for case managers, resource navigators, any community leader, teachers, mentors, coaches, general do-gooders, like anybody who's active within their community or anybody who's part of a community, which means that, of course, this is for you. As Sumesh noticed that he pivoted. My second purpose here is, of course, to give these tools to you so that you can use them in your own life as well. So by the end of this session, you should be able to share this, share the relationship between procrastination, crisis, trust, and shame with someone else, identify key conversational phrases and what they indicate, and share 3 tools to help those you serve combat procrastination and crisis. Our core values at Pacific Stoa are that we teach others to trust themselves, we respect others' inherent resilience, and we foster autonomy and self-reliance in others. This is the intellectual property clause, which this is being recorded, so you are welcome to read at your leisure. It essentially says the information that we're going to talk about is for you, for your own personal development, and to be used within whatever process and curriculum you're already using. If you're going to be using anything that we talk about to gain compensation or contracts, then we need to have a separate conversation. The slides and Hannah include swearing. This is not an attempt to make anyone uncomfortable. It is an attempt to reflect, I think, what most of us hear in the real world. I can't think of anybody I've worked with in the last 4 or 5 years that says that they work with people who don't swear ever. So swearing happens, and there is swearing in the slides. So let's talk about crisis. We're going to define some
quick
terms.
question.
Yes, absolutely.
So now that this is a train the trainer program, right?
Correct.
So does that mean we could use these slides and then train people?
The slides, maybe not.
Okay.
That's an excellent question. Because this is a train the trainer, what I really kind of want, and we'll talk about this too, along with attending this class we'll spend an hour collaborating. And the purpose between this group class and that one-on-one collaboration between you and I is to develop the way that you teach this, right? So I teach this a very specific way to coaches and a different way to my clients. And developing the way that you teach this with the people that you serve, I think is, more than half the battle. So yeah, I don't want anybody duplicating the way Hannah teaches it. I want it to be in Jessica language and Sumesh language and Jaylene language. I want it to be you. So adds a layer of complication. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes. And
okay.
Also, I had a second part of it, right? Now, since this is from your institution, right? So let's say I use these slides, then now there are 2 ways we can do it. One is, make my own version of these slides and do it. And however, since this is intellectual property, and let's say I'm using these slides in my own way, then am I allowed to give them some certificates out or something like that?
Let's talk about that when we do our collaboration session, because that's something I've been thinking about and haven't really put a lot of energy towards understanding the mechanics of that. You, at the end of this course, you get a certificate. But if we're thinking about expanding this out into a bigger class, we might need to talk about a different kind of licensing to go along with that and certificates. So let's pin that. I'm super excited to talk about that because it's kind of the way that I feel like this information gets expanded and amplified better. But I do kind of want to talk about that separately because I could start talking about that now and then we just spend the rest of the time talking about that.
Sure.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to say that, so that that question is done from me.
No, thank you for keeping to the agreement that ask the question the minute that it pops in your head. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. Okay, so crisis, we're going to be talking about it in both large and small ways. So small crisis, little c crisis is like standing in the grocery store and having too many options and not knowing which thing to buy, like I can't make any choices. I'm overwhelmed, like that kind of crisis. Big C crisis is panic attacks, right? It's the public freak out. It's the shutting down. It's that kind of a thing. So when I say crisis, I am talking about all of the points and all of the scales at which we get overwhelmed. Crisis has an interesting effect on how we perceive time. It tells us that this is how we spend the rest of our life. It also kind of tells us that this is always the way we've lived, right? If you think about it, like we've got our little drowning person here on the left, a person who is in a moment of drowning, like literally in the last few minutes of their life, their brains are absolutely on fire telling them that they are going to spend the rest of their lives this way because they are, right? So this is not a malfunctioning brain. This is an important thing to realize, is that crisis is our brains protecting us. So this sort of the decisions that we make when we are in times of crisis reflect that we kind of don't see any way out of this. Somehow everything is right this minute, like our whole existence is what we are experiencing right now, and that gets expanded out. So crisis, of course, breeds more crisis. Making decisions and choices in a time of crisis are typically not super good for us long term because we are trying to stop the bleeding, stave off, right? We're in reaction mode, and choices made from a place of reaction and are frequently not super good for us long term. Not 100%, but I'm sure you can see in your own work that you've seen people make choices that have been made out of a sense of desperation or overwhelm, and the result of those choices only results in more crisis. And this is, I should have changed this. The crisis is the removal of all of our choices. It is actually the removal of any of our choices. I know that one of us has a toddler. So let's say you remove a choice from a toddler. You take a choice away from a toddler. You tell them they need to sit here right now. Would most healthy toddlers, would their normal reaction be to be like, okay, I'll do that. That sounds like a great idea. Or would they lose their minds? Anybody have any guesses?
So, in terms of crisis, I'm thinking right now, it's a call for action, some action, right? Something has to be done, and you might either get a list of options that you choose from, or you go totally blank. But the mind right now is sparking off, saying, "Hey, I need to do something. Otherwise, this crisis will lead to something very drastically bad."
Exactly, and there's a name for that specific thing. That's called action bias. And you can see that my sign, I don't know if you can actually see, it's pretty little. I'm pretty far away from it. My sign says, don't just do something, stand there. All right, because action bias tells us that we have to react, we have to do something. And especially when we have our choices reduced or removed, and especially in those times, we feel like we have to react. And that's why I use the example of a toddler who, Jessica, you unmuted. Oh, dear me. Who did that? That was me. Sorry. Let's go back. Go ahead, Jessica. You were going to,
Yes, I was just going to say, it's almost like when you tell someone, don't think of a purple giraffe, and then that's all they can think about. That child would have been fine sitting there if that was their choice. You've removed all other options, and that's what they're being forced into. That is absolutely not going to happen.
Yeah, and we are honestly contrary. with adults too, because we all have toddlers in our heads, or I do. I don't know about you, but anytime I feel like I have my choices removed, and this is something we have discussion coming up on the first word, we'll talk about control. And even if I have removed my own choices, my brain still goes, no, right? Even if I've removed my own choices, removed my own control, removed my own autonomy, it doesn't matter. My brain is still going to react like I'm drowning, because that's what we do. We react. So crisis is all of these things. So let's define procrastination. First and foremost, procrastination is not a personality defect. Welcome, Jarlene. Procrastination is a symptom. It is not the disease. So, and we will talk about this as we move on through the slides, but frequently people try to go to battle with procrastination, but what we need to be undermining or reducing is the disease that's causing it. And procrastination, of course, feeds crisis, and both are part of the larger cycle that we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to talk about a big cycle, and the kickoff for the cycle is something that's called inconsistent or intermittent rewards and punishments, also called intermittent reinforcement. So whether you have a child or a dog, one of the things that they tell you is you have to be consistent, right? It doesn't work with cats. But with children and dogs, you have to be consistent. And that is sort of the example that the purest and simplest example, and then probably the most common example of where we get inconsistency from in our lives, we first get it from parents. So the extreme example of this is a child does a behavior one day and is rewarded for it. Child does exactly the same behavior the next day and is punished for it. A child growing up in that kind of environment, of course, would feel unsettled, not know what they're doing. We can talk all about how that breeds things like perfectionism and all sorts of stuff too. So we're symbolizing this as the magic 8-ball, right? We don't know what we're going to get. So that our efforts, our input into the world results in unpredictable feedback. And we, of course, we get this from our parents. We're not going to throw parents under the bus too much. I'm a parent, and I'm a human, which means I've been inconsistent as well. We get these from basically any human relationships, because humans, although inconsistencies frustrate us, we are also the generators of inconsistencies. So any relationship with any human, whether that be familial, romantic, business, other drivers is right? We get inconsistent feedback from other drivers as well. Gambling actually leverages this inconsistency. They don't have to come up with fancy algorithms for things like a slot machine. They just basically have to randomize it. And for some of us, that inconsistency is addicting. Other things that leverage inconsistency is domestic violence, narcissism, something called gaslighting, that sort of a person or strategy also weaponizes inconsistencies against us to keep us unsettled, unsafe, and unsure where we stand. The whole world provides us with inconsistency. The example I use is if someone is looking for a job and they're putting themselves and their resume or their CV out there 100 times in basically the same way, they're not going to get wholly consistent feedback. They're not going to get 100 yeses, and they're not going to get 100 no's. They're going to get a mishmash, right? So the world provides us with inconsistent feedback as well. But the biggest source of inconsistency in our lives is ourselves, right? So we are providing ourselves with that inconsistent feedback as well. So from that inconsistent feedback, we learn that we can't trust relationships, the world, and can you guess what else we learn we can't trust? Jessica's pointing at Jessica, Hannah's pointing at Hannah.
Ourselves.
Ourselves, right? And we are given some tools to learn how to trust the world, our relationships, like especially like larger systems in the world. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be trusting those, maybe not all the way all the time, but we are given very few tools to learn how to trust ourselves. And there is no difference between resilience and being able to trust ourselves. If you can trust yourself with all things, like, you have yourself to fall back on. So I'm sure you guys know the story about the scorpion and the frog, right? Does anybody want to tell the story? I'll tell the story then. So quickly, the scorpion there's been a big rain and a big flood. The scorpion is trying to make it across a swollen creek, so it's way too deep for him to cross. He sees a friendly looking frog. He says, "Hello, frog, please give me a ride across the flooded creek." And the frog says, "Nah, nah, 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 nah. You're a scorpion. You're going to sting me." And the scorpion says, "Why would I do that? If we were swimming across the river, the creek, and I sting you, we're both going to die." And the frog finds that this is solid logic, and so allows the scorpion to climb on his back. And halfway across the creek, guess what happens? Scorpion stings the frog. And as they're drowning, the frog says to the scorpion, "Why did you sting me? Now we're both going to die." And the scorpion says, "You know, I was a scorpion when you picked me up," right? So this parable is usually fable. This is a fable. This fable is usually told like, if someone tells you they're not trustworthy, listen, right? But I think that we could apply this in terms of like not being able to trust ourselves, is that we can be both the scorpion and the frog. Like we can keep singing ourselves in the back over and over again and knowing like, this Hannah, she's going to do it again. She's going to mess this up again, right? And do it over and over and over again. So this is a story about trust, but I kind of want to deepen it a little bit, and it can be a story about trusting ourselves as well. So if our results are not predictable, like if it doesn't matter what I do, like if I'm putting myself out there and trying really hard, trying to get my Google ads going and they don't seem to be working, what's the point? Why would I even continue to try? And this is called apathy. So when I'm teaching coaches like you, mentors and advocates like you, this blue squoval thing is an indicator of what you can be looking and listening for. So looking and listening for apathy, you'll hear things like, who cares? What's the point? Who gives a shit? Doesn't matter. And my favorite, I'm fine. Right? Apathy is a protective strategy, right? It is absolutely not a choice. So we are not making a choice to shut down in this way, but we are trying desperately to protect ourselves from putting ourselves out there, from exerting energy and having no outcome for that. So, and I'm saying this again, I'm being intentional about my repetition here. Apathy is not a choice. So when you hear someone saying, who cares? What's the point? Doesn't matter what I do. Don't push back on that, right? Because there's nothing, it's a black hole. There's nothing there to push back on. All energy gets sucked towards it. So apathy hurts a lot. Its very best friend is depression. They are distinct, but they are buddies. So apathy is an attempt to protect ourselves from caring too much about circumstances we don't have any control over. So before we move on, we've talked about inconsistency, and we've talked about not being able to trust specifically ourselves, and we've talked about apathy. So I want to pause real quick and make sure that we kind of do some reflection real quick before I move on, because this gets pretty deep. So far of all the things that we've talked about, what's really resonating with you?
Hannah, quick question in terms of these responses, right? Like I'm fine, and who cares, etc. Is it a answer to a question that comes within a person itself, or is it an answer to a question which comes from a third party?
Both. It can definitely be both. There is, let me go back to that slide it is going to be a response to kind of anything or person that is asking the person who's in apathy, the person who's shut down, asking them to stretch outside of that. Like, why does it matter if I try, right? Like, why would I go to that appointment? It doesn't matter. But also like internally, the conflict between, I know I need to be doing my dishes, and I'm like, who cares? There's already so many dishes over there, right? So it could definitely be both, responding to our internal pressure and our external obligations. Does that answer your question, Samish?
Yes, it does.
Any other, what other questions or reflections, Jessica?
I think the thing that resonates most with me is that idea that, like, even though we can be inconsistent, the world is inconsistent, the idea of just being the frog and trying to consistently be the frog, even if we know this is going to end badly, I'm going to get hurt, but kind of, I like the idea that that actions ripple out, that if I'm the frog, even when I know I'm going to drown, then maybe that scorpion sees that there is an alternative. Maybe, which I guess technically you're just buying into the stereotype anyway, because the frog is always going to be the frog. The frog is never going to turn around and drown the scorpion, but I feel like at least having that consistency. Now, granted, that's where you get, the strain, and you can become apathetic, and you can get worn down by it. But just trying to aim for always being the frog, so that maybe it changes somebody else's view.
Yes.
I don't know. I like the idea. I don't know if it works in practice, but I like the idea.
Well, and I think we talked about this, and we'll talk about this again when we circle these back around to the burnout discussion of the burnout classes. Is like, you can be the frog, the optimistic and very hopeful frog, which I love and is very you. There's a time when that runs out, right? We've run out of steam. The creek is too big, the scorpion's too heavy, even if it hasn't stung us. So I think that, like, the expectation that we will always be the frog is in itself its own kind of obligation. And so, like, the parable breaks down a little bit our analogy, but the idea that we can be both of those things to ourselves, I think, is kind of important. Like, who am I right now? Am I the scorpion or am I the frog? And maybe changing the story, changing the narrative, so that there isn't the possibility that the scorpion, the frog can trust the scorpion. So maybe that's what we're after, is changing the parable of the fable of the scorpion and the frog, so that it ends well for everyone. But go ahead.
Yeah, or maybe the frog can stay optimistic, but maybe not go all in all the time. Maybe we don't need to give the scorpion a ride, but we can wish him well and give him positive uplifting.
Eventually, scorpion, the river's going to go back down. You're going to be fine, bro. I believe in you, scorpion. Right? Right. So we're talking about boundaries there. Yeah. And we could have a whole separate conversation about boundaries, but one thing we have to have if we want to set boundaries is we need to be able to trust ourselves. One, to set them, and two, to keep them. So I think that more resilience, as we talk about trusting ourselves and more resilience, I think it becomes really, really important to our lives. So any other observations before we move on? Okay. All right, so apathy is, as I've said, it's a protective attempt. It is trying to be an adaptive response. It ends up being maladaptive, but it results in avoidance. So apathy is not a choice. It's not active. It's completely inactive. Avoidance is sort of the slightly more active arm of apathy. So avoidance is almost a choice. It's a choice-ish. It's essentially where we're focused on just one or two things in our lives. So here's what I hear. I'm only focused on this right now. Like, for example, I'm only focused on getting my housing taken care of right now. I'm only focused on getting my kids back. I'm only focused on this down payment for this house. All I'm doing is focusing on getting a raise right now. I'm just focused on work right now. I literally said that yesterday. The other thing that I hear people say is I try not to think too far ahead. That is a huge, huge indicator that there's some avoidance happening. And what this looks like to the person experiencing it is it looks like focus, right? It tells you the lie that it's focusing. And what it actually is avoidance. Because if you're hyper-focused on that point, and I want to make a distinction between focus and hyper-focus on one thing, a survival thing, usually, you are not keeping your head on a swivel to all the stuff going on around you. Like, you can't see opportunities coming your way. You absolutely cannot see emergencies coming your way. So we're still in that reactive, responsive mode. So avoidance very quickly results in active procrastination, which procrastination is a choice, even if it's a choice to not make a choice, right? Which masquerades as laziness, not getting work or home tasks does. And we told us about that a little earlier. Things not being done to your satisfaction or being chronically late. And so here's what I hear. I'm lazy. I can't get anything done. I need to be better at managing my time. That's the sneaky one that people don't think. If I reflect back, like, sometimes when people say I need to be better at managing my time, that means that someone's having some concerns about procrastination. They will always double down. No, I don't have trouble with procrastination. I'm just rushed all the time. Why are you rushed all the time? Well, because I didn't go to sleep on time. So I woke up late and just put the whole day behind. Well, what happened that made you up so late? I have insomnia. So, I mean, there's natural reasons for that. Well, and I played on my phone too long last night. Oh, which is another way of saying I procrastinated on going to sleep. So all through this and everything that I teach, it is not important that we be seen as right. We as coaches or mentors or advocates, doesn't matter if we're right, it doesn't matter if we're clever, we can let them own that. So if I'm walking someone backward through time to kind of like get to the source, go upstream a little bit, and they come to that on their own, that's way more important than me going, yeah, that happens. People play on their phones too much, right? That's not going to work. There again is me imposing control and taking choice and autonomy away from them. So okay, so procrastination then feeds crisis on both large and small time scales and scales and timelines. So it doesn't take much, right? It doesn't take too many procrastinations for that to roll right up into crisis. If we go back to crisis being a reduction of choices, and I've been procrastinating on doing my dishes, there's going to reach a point where I have a reduction of choices of how I eat dinner tonight, right? Do I eat with my face? Do I go out to eat? Do I finally wash some dishes? Do I not eat at all and just go to bed? All right, like, so that's a reduction of choices. And procrastination exists in this weird little, if you think about, I don't have a slide for this, like a little Venn diagram of two circles. It's the overwhelm of crisis plus a weird kind of optimism. I totally can get to that tomorrow, right? If we're in crisis, if we're overwhelmed, if we're frustrated, if we're crushed for time, and we are given the choice to have an optimistic little, I'll absolutely get to that tonight, we will take it, right? Because that's what crisis does to us. It sends us into that sort of reactionary zone. Crisis is an amazing liar. It tells us that this is how we're going to spend the rest of our life. Hi, baby. So here's what crisis sounds like. I feel like I'm drowning. Our brains don't know the difference between that kind of pressure and overwhelm and obligation and actually drowning. So we do feel like we're drowning because our brains tell us we are. I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm spinning my wheels. I keep trying and nothing ever changes. That's a really important thing to listen to. We're fucked is another one as well. Like, that's it, I'm done. It's all over. I don't know what I'm doing. Everything is out of control. So these are indicators of crisis. So with enough crisis, we reinforce to ourselves over and over and over again that we can't be trusted, right? The unspoken lie here is that if I was really a good person, a good grown-up, a good business owner, like, right? If I was a good human, crap like this wouldn't keep happening to me. So therefore, crap like this keeps happening, so I must be a bad person. I can't be trusted, right? So this cycle begins to reinforce itself over and over again. We're back to the scorpion and the frog. Before I move on to the visual of the cycle, what's something that we need clarification on before I move on? Okay. Cycle begins again. So let's talk about the cycle itself. So inconsistent or intermittent rewards and punishment is not truly part of the cycle. It kind of kicks it off though. So from that, we learn that we can't trust parents, relationships, the world, or more importantly, ourselves. If we can't trust ourselves, that results in apathy, which leads us to avoidance, which becomes procrastination, which generates crisis, which proves to us again that we cannot be trusted. So let's pretend like you're walking someone through this. Your question to the person that you're serving, and my question to you right now, is which one of these bubbles jumps out at you? Which one of these is kicking you right in the face? And I'd like your feedback if you have hands to do it. Go ahead, Samish.
For me, yeah. For me, like, sometimes depending on the paces which I'm going with, right, the results that are achieved. So the apathy bubble looks a little frightening for me.
Yeah, okay.
Doing all the things and spending all that time and energy, and then the end result is not what you expected, then I don't know, that freaks me out.
Yep. Okay. That was wonderfully honest, and I thank you for that, because I'm going to now, let's say Sumesh is my client and he's answered that way. We're going to call this the apathy cycle, right? Between me and Sumesh, right? My next client that I teach this cycle to, let's say they answer crisis. We're going to call it the crisis cycle, right? So we're going to name the cycle for the person that we're working with, which whatever is kicking them right in the face. And sometimes I'll ask, which one of these circles do you not want to talk about? Which is a dirty trick, because guess what we're going to talk about, right? That Sumish's answer was absolute perfection, because that's what is hurting us the most, but it's not where we're going to go. It's not where we're going to try to intervene. So we are not going to try to intervene at apathy, but apathy is a huge enemy. So thank you for that transparency and that honesty. That was beautiful. Jessica or Joylene, which one of these green bubbles do you not want to talk about or think about?
For me,
Uh,
go ahead.
Let's go.
Jessica.
Let's go. No. Joylene was first, and then Jessica. Go ahead, Joylene.
Okay. Well, a lot of them stick out to me, but I guess avoidance, because a lot of times if you avoid things, you try to pretend that they're not there, or, oh, I can come back to it later and things like that. But it just leads to this whole cycle that you're talking about here. So.
Yep. So for Joylene, this is the avoidance cycle, right? Or it could be the avoidance crisis cycle, right? You can mush it up as however you want to be it. Jessica?
Yes.
I think, at first I was thinking, well, none of them really jump out more than others, but I guess it would really just be that beginning, here we go. We got another opinion here. It would be that initial distrust. And I think it's because that's where I feel like, well, what if, that's where I feel like I can make a change. If I'm looking at a client and I'm going, oh, they're all the way over here in the cycle, I've got to get them back to where I can create more consistency, and I can try and show them that there are things that can be trusted so that we can try and change that cycle, But I think in my own personal life, it's probably the procrastination part where I'm like,
okay,
oh, I have this list of things I need to do, but in order to get to this, I got to take care of that. And which one's really the top of my priority?
Prioritization, yeah.
It's so overwhelming, the whole list, that I'll just do it later.
Absolutely. That was a perfect encapsulation of that Venn diagram, right? Like, I'm overwhelmed and I am given the opportunity, which we'll always have the opportunity to, with that optimistic procrastination, I absolutely am going to have time for this later. 100% of the time we're going to take that. Absolutely. That is the normal. Of course we are. So the reason that I have inconsistent or intermittent rewards and punishments off on its own, is because we really can't interact with that, right? It's a different color, it's a different shape. The ones that are in the green bubbles, we can actually impact. We cannot impact the inconsistency that is inherent in the entire universe. And to a point, the battling with inconsistency is sort of futile. And I hear you, Jessica. I hear you want to present to those that you're serving a consistent and trustworthy world. You can be that safe place for them, and you still can, and you still should. But what I am saying is that that has less effect on, that isn't developing something within them, because they've had, okay, that's a whole another 2-hour conversation.
Yeah,
yes.
but and even just seeing that level of, depending, obviously by the time they've gotten to me, that is so ingrained in who they are and so deeply rooted in everything that they believe, that it's really not, I mean, not to say, oh, we can't make a change, but that's, I definitely see what you're saying. It has to come from within them more than that external at that point. And even just the level of, we all have that inconsistent reward and punishment on some level, but to see that range of people who maybe had the extreme and how much deeper this all is, in their lives.
Yes. And I want to make something very, very clear, because I work with people from all over the income spectrum, is that everybody is dealing with some part of this, right? I developed this years ago, and I've worked through this, and I have a high level of awareness of this, and I still exist in this cycle. So it isn't a certain, I want to make it clear that it's not, because this feels very isolating, right? Everybody has this in their head, and everybody thinks that they're the only ones that do. That is why when we get to like actually talking about tools you can use, teaching someone this cycle and having them, like especially if you pull back in language that you've already heard from them, it tells them that they're not alone, right? This has been developed by me listening to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people over thousands and thousands and thousands of hours, right? Nobody's alone in this, but we all kind of feel like we are. Like, there's absolutely the implication here of like, what the fuck is wrong with me? I'm like, nope, nothing wrong with you. This is normal, and we all try different ways to assuage this or shut it down. So let's kind of talk about that a little bit. So how do we stop this stupid thing? Pretty much right about now, when I'm teaching the cycle, people are like, yeah, I get it, Hannah. Okay. How do I kill this thing? So what people typically do to try to learn from their past mistakes, make better informed choices in the future, and kind of teach themselves a lesson, is they leverage shame. And this can look like shame, guilt, obligation, self-judgment. There's a couple other words that can go along with that, but it is like trying to put out fire with gasoline. So here's what I hear when I'm listening for it. Here's how I hear shame, guilt, remorse, judgment. I can't believe that I never learn. I need to stop buying stupid stuff. I have to. That's obligation language. I'll do X and then I get to do Y. That is a reward language, right? I didn't do X, so now I can't do Y. There's punishment. I should have, I shouldn't have. I've earned more reward language. Next time, I'm lazy. Like the lazy comes in a couple different times. So really, really, really listening for shame and judgment language in the people that you serve is really critical. And if you begin listening for it, you will begin to hear it. There are a couple points at which, unless you already have talked about it with them, unless you've already taught them the cycle, I would not call these things out. You're using shame language. I'll do that with a client if we've already talked through the cycle and I have permission to point that out to them. Otherwise, I would not jump right up you're using shame language, because what is that doing? More shame, right? They don't need us for that. So this is for you, the look and listening things. This is for your own internal understanding. Take notes. You don't have to jump on things like this right now. You can come back to this later if you have multiple sessions or multiple interactions with this person. It is not important, especially with shame and judgment, that we point it out especially if they haven't been educated in the cycle, right? If you're not working through a process with them, this is for you to like tuck away in your little brain. So if you think shame as a tool worked, we'd all be fine. Everything would be great. Nobody would be procrastinating. If we all could talk garbage about ourselves enough to make that work, nobody would need me either. I mean, out of a job, it doesn't work. So using shame as a change tool provides us with even more inconsistency, because sometimes I can absolutely guilt myself into doing dishes. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes I rebel against myself and I just go lie down, go to the movies. And then we're reinforcing that lack of trust. We're reinforcing the inconsistencies when we try to use shame, judgment, guilt, when we try to do this internally and when we try to do this for others. One of the things that I see people, nonprofits especially do, because nonprofits like checklists, is that we give people a checklist of things to do and then wonder why it doesn't get done. And this is kind of an outgrowth of that. We are reinforcing inconsistency and reinforcing that they can't trust themselves by leveraging paperwork. And there is something called paperwork trauma. And it really, really, really is important. But I do also appreciate that agencies, government organizations, and nonprofits need that kind of form. They need paperwork. They live on paperwork. All right, so we can apply shame to all points of this cycle, right? And then we can apply shame to ourselves for shaming ourselves. So shame speeds up and strengthens this cycle. It literally just makes everything worse and worse and worse. It makes it faster. It makes it stronger. It makes it an even bigger enemy. So if shame doesn't slow down the cycle, what could we do? So I'm going to pause here. Let's see what time it's going to be. Okay, let's do this. Let's take a 3-minute break. And we'll come back in 3. And I would love to hear some ideas about what we could do to slow down the cycle without employing shame, judgment, obligation, anything like that. So let's come back at 52 minutes. Be right back. Yeah. Not a good dog. thoughts so far,
I had
Jessica?
to, I had to relocate to the little one's playroom. Didn't nap as long as I thought he would, but pretty good.
It's not bad. Okay. Let me see Jarlene's kitty.
Yeah, she's wanting all kinds of attention. She doesn't get spaded until next month when they had an opening. Look at there. And
Now there's Tank.
looks like she's
See-
going back into heat again. She's wanting all kinds of attention.
Oh boy. Yay. That's no fun.
It started last month. She just got old enough.
Yep. It's time to get that fixed up there.
Yeah, well, it's been scheduled. The Humane Society is so busy. I scheduled it at the end of November, but they didn't have any openings until February. So,
Wow. Wow.
yeah. And I called
No
it,
babies, no baby.
they were the same way. So I was like, well, you know, it's cheaper through the Humane Society. We're going that route.
Yep. Okay. I don't remember what time I said to be back. 52, 54, something like that. I think we're back.
Yeah, I'm back.
I believe it was
Okay, good.
52, but so we're
I
back.
gotta write that. So, okay, so real quick kind of reflection time. What are some ways that you think that you could help someone you serve or yourself slow down, weaken, or stop this cycle? It's okay if you don't have an idea, you can say that, and that's perfectly lovely too.
Look at this as an instance instead of a continuous process. Like if there is something you're looking at working on right now, then look at it as an individual silo and look at why that could not be done and try to fit in one of these, rather than looking at a continuous process and try to connect it with what you have experienced in the past and try to find a loop of past and try to find I don't know, I'm unable to find the right word, but yeah, maybe try
I
to
get
find
what
the
you're
right habit. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, pulling it out of time, like making it distinct, like this particular situation
Okay.
is not just has been happening forever, right? Is that what our brains tend to click into? But you're talking like maybe reframing it into like, let's talk about this one incident. Am I picking that up?
Yeah, correct.
Good. I like that. My goodness. Any other
Yeah.
thoughts about how we can slow this down?
Yeah, I got to say this. I'm the only one who doesn't have a cat right now. So.
Do you want a cat, Sumish? I will send this guy to you. He is ancient, he is old, he is blind, and he is fat, and he has very particular ideas about the way the world works around him. So, I wouldn't give him up. I also have a dog who's needs attention right now too, but it's not mandatory, Sumish. Jessica,
Yeah, this one's the same way, wanting my attention at the moment.
all the time. Okay, go lay down. Go on. Go lay down. I'm busy right now.
Yeah,
No
I have a
dog.
baby, a dog, and 2 cats that are around here somewhere waiting for attention.
Yes.
I think part of it, just talking through things with clients and kind of doing our best to remove that shame, letting them know that this is a normal cycle that everyone on some level is dealing with, and that it's not just them. And then, in some cases, kind of like I've found in the past, being able to give someone a win where they go, oh, okay, I accomplished that. Look what I did. This wasn't that hard. It's only been on my to-do list for 6 months and I managed it in 6 minutes,
Go that way, please. Yes, I have a client, when I was developing a tool, I didn't have a name for it. Basically, it was, I see you, I love you. You start the day with a blank sheet of paper and you just start listing everything that you've accomplished. Got out of bed, took a shower, right? Like just any accomplishment that you can possibly make up, looking for those wins. I didn't know what to call it, and then a client of mine called it the ta-done list. Ta-done, which I thought was brilliant. So yes, looking for wins, looking for that. And this isn't positive affirmation stuff. Like this is teaching them to move through the world looking for things that they've accomplished, because very often, especially in crisis and overwhelm states, we move through the world looking for things, places where we are lacking. And that's not fair or realistic. So I love these ideas. Darlene, do you have any ideas?
No, I just feel like, talking with them through it, because I feel like, they listed, a lot of what I was thinking. So
Yeah. So let's jump back into slides and we'll talk about what I do to help. To slow down and weaken the cycle, we're going to be strengthening the enemies of the cycle, which are something we've talked about already, resilience, and something we've kind of just touched on, which is just awareness. Okay, we did this. So let's do a little test first before we do that. So here's a slide. Here's a picture, me during an exam, just to be sure. 10 plus 5 equals 15, double checking on the calculator. What is this of those enemies? Which of these enemies is this an indicator of?
It's that like self-doubt, not even trusting yourself on something you know that you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, lack of trust in self. And to combat lack of trust in self, we build resilience, because that's what trusting ourselves is resilience. And to do that, I'm going to recommend just teaching the cycle, really no other intervention than that. Teaching the cycle adds a level of awareness and resilience. And like I said, it teaches people that they're not alone in this, right? Like that, oh, other people think this too? Absolutely, right? So just teaching the cycle for some percentage of people is enough to begin slowing it down. Just the awareness that it's there, just the resilience around understanding that they're not alone in this. So yeah, tool number 1, teach your clients the cycle. Knowing that there's pattern isn't often enough to help us be more aware, helps us slow down the cycle without further interventions. And I know this seems a little unsatisfying, like we're not giving them anything to do. Like we're not doing anything, we're just teaching the cycle and going, have a nice day. But that's okay. They may need that time of awareness to just sort of understand where they are in the cycle. And that pattern recognition is really, really critical. I'm at apathy right now, right? And we'll talk more about this as we go along, but under just pure observation of it is really important. So just teaching the tool can really help. There are other tools associated with this, the Tiny Trials game, 3 versions of you, and the GPS and goal setting, which these are all things that we can talk about when we do that our collaboration, and there's other trainings available as well. So this is not just teaching the cycle is not the only thing available. It's just the one we're talking about today. All right, so the friend that says they're fine, even when they're clearly not. What is this an indicator of?
I would say apathy.
Apathy it is. Yep, I'm fine. Nope.
And a quick question.
Yes.
My brain immediately went blank when I saw it. The resilience. I remember the Tiny Trials, the 3 versions of you, and what was the third one you put up there?
GPS.
Oh, the
and goal
GPS,
setting.
my favorite one. Okay. I love it. And teach the cycle.
Teach the cycle. So here's apathy. Who cares? What's the point? Who gives a shit? Whatever. That's a Gen X thing, though. I think that's mostly my generation that does whatever. All of that is apathy, and it's really difficult to counteract apathy, but awareness of that it's there is, and that's the only intervention I would encourage, is just teach the cycle. Please don't fight with apathy. Please don't go to battle with it, because this is a cycle. If you slow down one little piece of this, it's going to slow down or weaken everything else. Apathy is dangerous. You don't want to go dipping your toes in there too much. All right, so when the teacher asks who's presenting next, I just love their faces. What's this an indicator of?
I would say that's avoidance.
That is definitely
That's why you always
avoidance.
sit in the back of the class when you're a short person.
Right. I try not to think too far ahead. I'm only focused on right now. Of resilience. So what the step for undermining avoidance, teach the cycle. And number 2 is observation. The second tool we'll talk about. So encourage clients to observe their behavior, reactions, and actions without changing their behavior. And this is where the scientist and animal analogy comes in. This is one of my favorite tools to teach. It's kind of the prerequisite to a lot of work that I do. So the scientist and animal analogy goes like this. All right, so in your mind right now, think about a scientist sitting in the wilds. The scientist is observing a wild animal. Would that scientist try to change the wild animal's behavior?
No.
No. What would the scientist do?
Look at what the animal is doing and try to understand why is it
Mhm.
doing so.
Yeah, and take
And
notes,
then-
right?
Yeah.
So let's say this scientist observes that the wild animal has changed its own behavior. Would the scientist try to change the wild animal's behavior back again?
No, again, yeah.
No, again, right.
Yeah.
Scientists might try to understand why the animal changed its behavior, right? That's called
yeah.
pattern recognition. So we're going to go upstream, look for what happened before, look for what happened afterwards. But yeah, the scientist is not going to try to interact with that. So let's say the scientist observes the wild animal doing something disgusting. Would the scientist write down in their notes, oh my God, that's the stupidest animal ever. I can't believe that it ate all of that elephant poop. That's the grossest thing that I've ever seen. Is that what the scientists would write down in their notes?
If I was the scientist, I might write that, but no, most likely it would just be an observation.
Yeah. Scientists would write down animal ate elephant poop, right? Let's say that the scientist notices that the scientist's own presence is disruptive or agitating to the animal. What would the scientist do? Ooh. Jessica?
I would assume they'd try and either find another way to observe the animal without being present, or at least try to conceal their presence so that it wasn't affecting their observation.
Mm-hmm. Or they just leave, right? They just book it. And either way, they're going to take notes, right? So we're back to that again. So the scientist and wild animal analogy is important, I think, because I kind of want you, and I kind of want anybody that I'm serving, I want them to be both. I want them to be the wild animal doing their wild animal things. And I want them to be the scientist observing from that distanced perspective, that distanced, non-judgmental perspective. Observation is the first step of that. Like that's what the scientist is going to focus on first. Observation first, just noticing, right? The second thing that the scientist is going to do is they're going to begin looking for patterns. What happened before? What happened after? The analog here is like if one of my indicators for me personally is apathy. If I hear myself in my brain go, ugh, who cares? Right? And I'm like, oh, I'm in apathy. So that's the observation piece, right? Do I change my behavior if I notice my apathy? Not intentionally. Like if I'm going to procrastinate, I just watch myself procrastinate now, right? It makes it hard to do that. Like I will change my behavior just because I'm observing myself, but I'm not changing my behavior because I feel obligated or I beat myself up about it. I change my behavior because I notice the pattern, right? If I walk past the dishes and I go, ugh, gross, I don't care anymore, right? I can see, oh, I'm about to procrastinate. Once we have observation, pattern recognition, then we can try experiments, which is exactly what the scientists would do. Maybe they would go back to the lab and develop an experiment to test a hypothesis. So then we can begin to experiment, intervene, interrupt, and that people can do this, all of that on their own. If you teach them the cycle and you teach them some of the scientist wild animal analogy, they get the opportunity to do this on their own. And they're usually pretty dang quick with it. But the observation is really, really, really important. Observing our own behavior without changing our behavior and without judgment. One of the hardest things that I ask my clients to do is track their spending without changing your spending. It's hard, right? I got a message 3 days ago from someone who's supposed to be tracking, and she said, I just chose not to spend the money because I didn't want to write it down. I'm like, yeah. See, she changed her spending behavior without obligation, without forcing herself. And she changed because the effort of writing it down was too much. I'm like, perfect. She added enough friction in there and a little observation. So the scientist and wild animal analogy is really, really important. What observations? Well, let's go for the whole time that we've been together today. What so far has been really resonating with you before we move on?
I think for me, just the idea that like teaching that cycle makes such a big difference. Sorry, we got a loud noise. Don't hear.
Just fine.
Just shows that, you know, people really have no idea that they're following this pattern, and just being aware that it's a normal pattern and that it's predictable and that it's understandable is enough to kind of bring their attention to it and start a change. I like that.
Yeah, it doesn't take a big intervention. The idea is that we have this big enemy, this cycle, and what we want to do is we want to fight with it. We want to go to war with it. If you go to war with it, it's going to fight back and it likes it. So we're undermining it, right? Like we're slowly chipping away at it. Sneaky, right? That's the way that people make these changes. But the pushback that I get as I'm teaching these really, really small tools is this isn't doing anything. It's not going to work. It's not doing anything. It's like my grandma said, if you get a cut and you put some alcohol, it's not hurting, it's not working, right? No, that's not what we're after here. Small, small, small. Thank you, Jessica. What other observations, Jolene or Samish?
Yeah. I also like how this cycle comes into the picture, because most of the time when somebody is procrastinating, they are able to understand that they are procrastinating, but they are unable to find a real reason why it is happening, and find a pattern with it. But with this cycle, slowly, once you start observing it, or even when you start procrastinating, there is some voice which comes in saying, hey, there is something wrong. But with this cycle, you're able to predict, or you will be able to see a cycle of what's coming next, and over a period of time you see the cycle playing out, and then you're able to connect it. Hey, if I don't do this now, then this is coming, and then slowly that behavior changes come in.
Yeah, and it can even be less work than that, right? It even can just be, oh, I'm observing my avoidance, and then suddenly you're doing the thing, right? It becomes almost frictionless. Like I've observed the pattern, and just by observing it, it interrupts it. And that it's very weird. And it's very fast. Thank you, Samish. Jolene, any observations, reflections?
I don't think so. I think they mentioned it, it's that's just kind of been where been at lately, is just kind of thinking through and looking, just kind of observing what I've been doing and my behavior, to know it and just kind of see where things need to change.
And that's and I'm going to push back on that very carefully and with lots of love, where things need to change. Did you hear the obligation and where things need to change?
Yes.
That's the obligation language as well. It's so sneaky.
Yes.
It's just insidious. So that's important, right? Like the the break that we give ourselves, the grace that we can give ourselves by simply observing and not looking to intervene, but first observation and then just the pattern recognition, still without any interventions, is still super powerful. So yeah, we have this deeply wired into our heads. Okay, so little Miss Badass says the 4 stages of a day off are I will do so much stuff. Later, I'll do lots of stuff. Eventually, I'll do some stuff and then, oh no. So what is this an indicator of?
I would say avoidance, definitely procrastination,
Definitely procrastination. Yep.
definitely laundry. I'm sensing laundry.
Definitely laundry. Okay. There's laundry is nowhere in here, but okay. So this is absolutely procrastination. I'm lazy. I can't get anything done. I need to be better at managing my time. That's obligation language as well. From the outside, it looks like someone's priorities are out of whack. Like, why are they spending money on eating out when they can't pay their rent, right? Like, why am I going out to a movie when I'm trying to save for a down payment? Like, it looks like priorities are out of order, but they're actually responsive to what that person, the crisis that they're in at that moment. Putting things off, procrastination, that kind of a thing. Yay, procrastination. Teach the cycle. Number 2, observation. So, and number 3 is a tally, journal, or log. Some folks never need this third tool. They never need to get to literally physically writing down, tally, journaling, or logging. This is pretty extreme. When I ask people to tally, and like I said, I ask people to track their spending. That's a form of tally, journal, or log. And it depends on what they're comfortable with. If they already are journalers, they can build this, fold this into their journaling. I do have people like tally like this though. That kind of tally, right? And it's something specific. It could be obligation language. They're just tallying the times that they feel obligation, they hear obligation language in their head, or judgment, shame. And right alongside with that, almost unstoppable, is when they do that, they notice the patterns. I worked through a nonprofit 2020. And I was working with a young woman who is in a domestic violence situation, like actively, like she was still living in the same household with her abuser. And she had nonstop, constant flood of judgment language. I'm stupid, I'm ugly, I'm dumb, I can't believe I keep doing shit like this. It's the stupidest thing. I get money and then I spend it. I make stupid choices, all of that stuff, just a barrage of it. And I taught her the cycle, and I asked her to tally when she felt that language, not stopping it, not fighting with it, just observing it. And she came back with her own pattern. And her pattern, what she noticed, Hannah, I noticed is, if you hear someone say, hey, I noticed that, oh, that's the stuff. Listen, because they're about to tell you something amazing. That's pattern recognition. She said, I noticed that when he's around, that this ticks up. So everybody on this call would right now go, yeah, duh, of course that's going to happen. But she needed to see that for herself. So I couldn't tell her that. Like, of course, I wasn't not going to tell her anything really, but she noticed the pattern that when he's around, just his physical presence, even if things are good, that she feels that uptick in shame and judgment. So that was that's a very extreme example, but that's an important pattern recognition. So tool number 3 is encourage them to tally, track, journal, or log when they're using whatever enemy they're tracking without trying to change their behavior. This is not about accountability, right? So this is, sometimes if someone is physically tracking, that lasts for about a day or two, and then they don't need to track anymore. They're noticing enough in their head. So the physical act of writing it down is pretty temporary. Oh, yes, the big caveat. This tracking or even just observation has the potential to hurt someone, right? So what typically happens, let's say I'm having someone observe for language or observe themselves for times of avoidance. I'm just focused on this right now. They're going to have a little uptick in stress as they notice it, and then that stress is going to drop off. The anxiety will go bloop, and then it drops, bloop, and then it drops. If it goes up, if it ticks and then it goes up exponentially, they have to stop this practice. They immediately. This goes for anything that I'm having somebody observe for. So even if I'm asking someone to just track their spending, we have this talk. If you notice that that just tracking your spending makes everything worse, makes your stress level go up, stop the practice. And the rule that I give them is stop and then email me immediately. I don't care if it's 4 o'clock in the morning, email me, right? And this builds in a level of like they get to trust themselves to stop this practice, right? So I am back end encouraging them to trust themselves, right? Because they understood, this is getting worse. That's an observation. I need to stop this practice and email Hannah. So it builds a little bit of resilience right in there, even if they've failed the tool, which they can't. Because even think about the wild animal and the scientist. The scientist taking a step back or finding a different way to observe is still data. It's still an important observation, and it is really critical. So that it doesn't happen very often. I have on occasion gotten an email like 45 minutes after a session where somebody said, I had to stop. I'm like, cool. They did exactly what I asked them to do. They can trust themselves to not continue hurting themselves. So we are digging real close to some really sensitive nerves here, and we want to be really respectful of their autonomy. The data that we get, the collection of the tick marks is not important if it's hurting them. And then also like understanding and telling them specifically that tracking this hurts a little bit. So it's going to hurt, and then it's going to go away. It's going to hurt, and then it's going to go away. And building that resilience with them is in a sneaky way, I think is really important. So even in the tool failing them, they still can have the opportunity to build resilience. So I never recommend behavior change. I never tell people to do. And I'm talking with people about their money. I know you guys are talking with your people about other things, but I don't ever recommend behavior change. Your client will quickly and naturally evolve and grow any tool that you teach them. It is more important that we teach them adaptable tools and let them develop that behavior change. And then they have ownership over that than if we're directing them, because we want to be respectful of people's autonomy. They will independently change their own reactions and behaviors. It is more important that your client create their own change than it is that you are right or clever. Doesn't matter how right or clever. We want them to have full possession of that change. Okay. I am extremely busy doing very much while feeling very overwhelmed. What's this an indicator of? I hear crisis in here with the overwhelmed. Extremely busy, doing a lot. For once, I'd just like to spiral into control. More crisis. Feeling sad, getting fat, being broke, having no friends, and then me doing literally nothing to improve my life. What do you guys hear in this one?
Avoidance?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Yeah.
Or avoidance, and what difference does it make?
Yep. Apathy. I hear shame. Right. I'm doing nothing to improve my life. Yeah. Definitely crisis too. Kind of almost everything, right? And here's like the visual of drowning comes back again. And I think that's really important. So all of these are crises. I feel like I'm drowning. So to battle crisis, we need awareness and resilience. Of course, teach the cycle. Other tools that I teach in times to help undermine crisis is the hot state reality check, the window of tolerance, and the regression to the mean. what I would not recommend is trying to intervene while someone is in acute crisis at the moment that you're talking to them. Everything that we've talked about is a great tool to teach after the fact, like after something has happened or before the fact, but during a time of crisis is not the time to teach. What I do are what's called micro interventions, and it is, of course, working in some consent here. It's always okay to ask permission to share a tool. The example would be like, I'm working with someone who's clearly frustrated. They're just overwhelmed. They can't think straight. I'm asking questions they're not tracking very well. And I might call attention to that. And then I might ask, like, looks like you're really frustrated right now. Is it okay if I share a tool with you? And if they say no, then I don't share the tool. We just move on with our day. There's other stuff we can talk about. So I use a couple of little micro interventions. These are, if you think about the person who's drowning, you are giving them one rescue breath. This isn't going to fix anything. It's not going to resolve anything. You're not saving or rescuing them. You're giving them one breath. They're probably going to go right back underwater again, but you gave them a breath, right? You gave them a little bit of space. You gave them a little break. That's what these micro interventions are for. So I want to make very clear that these are super, super, super small. So yes, a rescue breath, momentary relief. You plant a seed that they will likely reflect on and come back to later over and over and over again. And they will probably not remember you asking this question ever. They will remember the response that they had. So, and it's critical that this is asked as a question. Is this how you live the rest of your life, or is this temporary? So tell me why you think this would, what kind of effect do you think this would have on someone who's actively in crisis? If I ask this question, if you ask this question.
I think at that moment, sometimes it does feel like it will be forever. This is, even though somewhere in their mind they realize it's temporary, it feels like it's forever.
Mm-hmm. And we can withstand a lot if it's temporary. And our brains absolutely tell us the lie that this is absolutely gonna be forever. The second, and not my most favorite, is a reflection, right? So I'm reflecting back something. You feel like you're gonna live the rest of your life this way. That's okay too, but the question is a little more potent. So again, we're gently pushing back, like Jessica said, on the crisis that the lie our brains are telling us that this is how I die, right? Please do not say, if you say, this is temporary, right? You're not going to live the rest of your life this way. That absolutely comes off as suck it up, walk it off, right? Rub some dirt in it and move on, right? So either a question or a reflection, but definitely not as a statement. Other micro interventions, you've got a lot going on. It would be weird if you weren't freaked out. It would be weird if you weren't stressed or frustrated or whatever language they're using. So what kind of effect do you think that this intervention would have on someone who's actively in crisis?
The answer will come depending on the state of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on the answer, you can look at whether you can find where they fit into the cycle and then help them out.
Yeah. And if they're actively in crisis, certainly do that sort of diagnostic work in your head. Keep this as notes for you for maybe 10 minutes from now, or maybe next time that you talk. If they're actively in crisis, our jobs aren't to outwardly, definitely we need this, right? We need the information. Wow, this person is in crisis, right? We need that data, but they might not need to hear it right then. So if we say something like you have a lot going on, it'd be weird if you weren't freaking out. And again, use the word that they used. It normalizes their response and reaction. Like legitimately, people have a lot going on in their lives, right? If you're working a job, 2 jobs, and you're trying to and your car needs work, and you're still trying to get that raise, and one of the kids is sick, and your dog's been diarrheaing all over the house. It would be weird if you weren't freaked out. That would be, so we're normalizing that. Yeah, man, that's a lot. It's okay. We're pushing back on that crisis. Another intervention is, how much longer can you go on like this? This requires a delicate tone of voice, right? Because this can sound like an accusation. I'm sure that you can maybe find a better way to phrase this. How much longer can you keep doing this? It is one of those that could go both ways. And it's similar to this is forever. It focuses on that time dilation and contraction, that crisis tells us we have. Okay, so this one requires a little bit of humor. And I love this one. It's probably my favorite, but I don't use it very much. It requires a high level of rapport with whoever you're talking to. So, has anybody in the history of mankind who's dumber than you and less resourceful than you figured out something like this? So what effect do you think this has on someone who's in active crisis?
Self-affirmation. I remember this question from the last session too.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, you definitely have to be, you'd have to know the person pretty well, but I think for one, it reminds them, you know, kind of like that old saying, well, you've survived 100% of your bad days this far.
So far.
You know, to remind them, like, you have overcome more than this, and you are smart, you are resilient, and you can make it through.
Yep. Yeah. It's, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yes. The alternative, you end it with survived something like this. You could end it with that as well. We are using humor to tweak their perspective a little bit, not to challenge that, but to kind of just offer them a slightly ridiculous sort of perspective on it that for a minute can kind of give them a little break. For the most part, when I ask this question, they'll laugh, right? Now we're bringing down, the crisis is coming down a little bit. And then you can even ask, how do you suppose those dummies survived something like this, right? Like, so now we're getting into some actual strategy, like, well, those dummies, right? Like, so this has the potential to really begin to kind of change the conversation, but it really, really requires that there's enough trust there between you and that person that you're not just like poking, you're not just mocking them. So, and this one, how can I best support you? How can I show up for you? If you have nothing else to say, default to this. And they will come up with some, probably they'll say nothing, or they'll come up with something completely out of the weird and unachievable, but that's not important. You are asking for what they're needing and giving them the control of that without giving them the responsibility of coming up with their own solutions. So, all right, so she has a nice thing. Her little demony black guy says, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve this. And she gets rid of her nice thing. Not everyone realizes this, but if you clean the pile of receipts out of your purse and stack them together, it makes a teeny tiny book about why you're broke. You can shout out anytime when you hear what the theme is here.
This is some shame.
This is some sweet shame. Everybody thinks I'm a fraud, says everybody. Yeah, shame, judgment, also obligation language. You'll hear reward and punishment language here, like right in the middle. I do X and then I do Y. Where have we heard reward and punishment before as we've been talking today? Ooh. Right at the beginning. It's part of inconsistency. Yeah, I'm sorry, Surmish, what were you saying?
Yeah, the part with self-doubt and all that comes in.
Yeah. So here's us using shame to try to achieve a goal, to resolve something, when it is actually, I'm sorry, use rewards and punishments to try to get long-term behavior change, when rewards and punishments were kind of what started the whole thing. So we're using the generator of the cycle to beat the cycle, and it's not going to work. So yes, for shame and judgment, teach the cycle, teach them how to observe their behavior without judgment, and then potentially tally and journal. So we are over time. I'm going to keep going. I would like to pause. Does anybody need to leave? Do you guys, let me, blah, blah, blah. How much time do you guys have left in your own days that we can keep going?
I'm okay.
I've
we
got
can
time.
finish
I'm
up.
okay. I have time.
Sumisha, I didn't quite hear you because I
Yeah,
didn't direct that
I'm
very
okay.
well.
We can
Okay.
finish it.
Okay, Jessica? Okay, I should have directed that better. Oh, what's that? What did I just do? I said I should have directed that better. What was that? That was judgment, shame. I said I could have directed that better. Okay, so offer reflections to your clients. Reflection provides the people that we're working with the opportunity to be motivated by their own work and to enjoy the process of learning. And that reflection allows them to sit with and really be without avoiding their thoughts, feelings, and emotions. I don't know if you've noticed, but all the way through, I've been asking for reflections over and over and over again. Reflections are, I think, do most of the heavy lifting when people are trying to work through behavior change. Reflections reinforce perspective and awareness. So one of my favorites is what surprised you, right? What do you think you'll notice as you begin? So if someone's beginning that tracking or just that pattern recognition process, what do you think you're going to notice as you begin observing for times when you are rewarding and punishing yourself? Oh, backing up. When you ask someone what they'll be what they think they'll notice, you are asking them for a hypothesis. So we're still keeping with that scientific language. What patterns do you think you'll notice? More of that hypothesis. And so I typically take notes on these and then I follow up. Did you find that you said that you might notice blankety blank? Did you notice that after all? And sometimes they'll be like, no, I noticed something totally different, which is fine, right? That's what the observation is for. So let's call back to crisis a little bit. And I think the crisis, the removal of, I need to change the language on this. Crisis is the removal of choice, any choice, little, big, lots of them, all of them, none of, few of them, doesn't matter. We can use homework or whatever you want to call it. I call it client practice. You can use homework or client practice as another way to enrich what you're doing with the person that you serve, enrich it with choice. I rarely, if ever, give my clients homework. I ask the question, what would you like to do? What would you like to focus on between now and the next time that we talk? What would you like me to follow up with you on? Right? That kind of thing, like what is, and you can grow this right out. Like if they said that they'd notice, if you've asked them to just simply observe for reward times when they're rewarding and punishing themselves, you can ask, what do you think you'll notice as you observe for that? Maybe they say that it stresses me out, right? You can work that into homework, like what do you think? The homework would be, yeah, do you, okay, never mind, go back again. I got myself all messed up in there. Ask your client what they would like to do. Would you like to track your times that you have rewarded or punished yourselves for homework? Is a simple way to do that I should have said to begin with. Oh, did it again. Give several options for homework ideas at the next meeting and next meeting time. So if they can't come up with anything for homework, I've usually got a couple in my pockets. I'm like, okay, so I've got this idea and this idea. Which one would you like to do? So again, we're giving them choice. And then meeting times, right? Like even just as simple as, do you want to meet next week or the week after? Like starting with stuff like that. Just looking for every opportunity to give the people that we serve choice. Be okay with your clients not doing their homework. Like 100% of the time, people don't do my homework. They do it and they don't do it, right? Like they're like, I didn't do my homework, Hannah. Like, what do you mean? Like, I tracked for like a day and then I stopped tracking. Oh, did you notice anything? Yeah, I noticed that they absolutely did their homework, right? Do they have a notebook full of journal entries? No, doesn't matter. They did it. They thought about it. So yeah. Reinforce perspective awareness, not accountability and compliance. We are not here for that. And like, if you are just going to assign homework, what is the purpose of that homework to my client? Is it just, am I assigning homework, or am I asking them what homework they want just to have something to follow up with them on? Or am I asking it to reinforce something that we're working on, to reinforce that perspective or the observation or resilience? And practice unconditional positive regard. We won't dig super deep into that, but you're welcome to Google that. It was championed by Carl Rogers. And it's powerful. Basically, nobody can do anything wrong when they're my client. Like, doesn't matter what choice you made. Perfect. That's great. We're working from that point. So as a final word of warning, this cycle, as we've talked about, is powerful. It's deeply ingrained into our brains, and it's really tempting to encourage or allow the people that we serve to fight it, right? To double down on the obligation, to like, I really just need to I just need to stop avoiding things. Whatever, right back at shame and obligation again, right? Gently push back on that, because understanding that it is part of our DNA at some point, right? We're bathed in it in our brains. So fighting the big enemy with big weapons, it does not work. So that's why I'm over and over big and like talking about tiny tools, really small ways to encourage that long-term change, because we don't want to incur any risk here. If we go after a gigantic life changer, like today's the day I stop procrastinating and I'm going to schedule the rest of my life for the next 3 months, and I'm going to-do list and task list out everything. How much risk are we building into that? How much expectation, right? So by keeping the tools incredibly small, by practicing unconditional positive regard, we are reducing the risk of quote unquote failure, and therefore building resilience and building the chance that they will be successful in this. So yeah, don't feed the cycle. The smaller the tool, the better it will work. What's that? Okay, we don't have time for that. So I do have a little bit of housekeeping. I've got some stuff coming up I really want your guys' input on. But before we kind of move on to the housekeeping, see, I don't want to use the reflections I just taught you, because then, okay, I'm going to do it anyways. What's one thing as we've been talking today that has surprised you, that you did not expect?
Yeah, I like the simplicity of the tool and the way it is structured, instead of giving reasons why procrastination happens and telling them great things to do, and like you told, like checklist and all those tools. This is a much more practical and simpler way to get somebody starting, and rest of the tools is most of the times maybe something that the individual himself or herself will figure out in terms of, hey, how do I try to do this? And then they might try to find, hey, checklist works for me or something else works for me, rather than we telling them what to use. So I really like that.
Yeah, everything that I teach and everything that I encourage others to teach is adaptable. It has to be changed by that person for it to be a tool that works for them. So yeah, thank you for that feedback. Jessica or Joylene, any surprises?
Not to say surprises, but I loved when you talked about the micro interventions, just having that validation of, hey, look, you are doing a lot already. I feel like so many people, especially when they're feeling that overwhelmed, they don't feel seen in that. They feel like everybody else is taking care of everything. I'm losing my shit over here. Everyone else can handle it. And
Absolutely.
I'm just And so to validate those feelings of no, it would be strange if you didn't feel overwhelmed right now, and kind of giving them that list of, look, these are these accomplishments that you're already handling. These are the stressors that are piling on you. No wonder you're feeling this way. That's normal. And then kind of letting them work through that on their own to see like, hey, all of these stressors are temporary things. All of these accomplishments that I'm doing every day, these stay with me. I can get over this hurdle. I can make it over anything, and just kind of building from there. I also love, like, I almost see it in my mind is that like David and Goliath. If you try to fight this cycle head on, it's going to see you coming and you're never going to win.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
Let's
And
go.
so like, you've got to really, come at it from a different angle, undermine it, maybe grease the floor behind the giant, so that it exists, this is normal, but you can just see the little ways where you can win. I like that. And then I was going to ask, I saw on one of the slides it said hot state. Is that those micro interventions, or is that something else I haven't heard of?
That's a tool we can talk about, like not now, but like it's a way to help people kind of reset their interpretation of the world around them, and then therefore their reactions to it. So it's all about it's an awareness. It's an awareness tool. Yeah, it's an awareness tool. So yes,
awesome. I look forward to learning about that too.
It's definitely, it's centered around crisis. So, Joylene, any surprises? Uh-oh, okay. So part of what I do is changing the way that we talk to each other about money. Although we have not talked at all about money, but I'm sure you can understand how procrastination is one of those things that both directly and indirectly changes the way we talk about, changes the way we behave with our money. So in the spirit of changing how we speak to each other within our communities, and you as community leaders, who is one person that you could share this tool with? It could be a colleague, it could be a friend, family member, someone that you serve, but who can you think of that would benefit from this, from knowing this cycle? Okay.
Realistically, I think any of my clients could use the information. But again, I think, if they're in crisis, it's not the time. If we can catch them in that cycle somewhere, then I think they'd be more open to it. But then, of course, just as a mom, I think like, when do you get into that with your kids to say, hey, is it even possible to teach them that so young that they don't get caught up in that? Obviously not this young. He's not doing it yet.
He's a wild animal. And I know that Joylene works with families with kids, and Sumish mentioned that he wants to work with children too. There are ways, we don't have time, to build this into kind of like a game, to build resilience games. And I can teach you a couple to build awareness games that are just part of your normal conversation with your child, so that they are aware of this as it's happening. And yes, we could simplify anything that we've talked about. You're not going to get an 8-year-old to sit down and talk about the cycle with you. It's not going to happen, but 8-year-olds absolutely are capable of things like pattern recognition. What happened right before that? I hear you saying that, care, like what happened before that, right? Working them, modeling that pattern recognition and observation strategy, you can sneak it in on.
Yeah, these are the types of things where I wonder, why isn't this in, a high school? Kind of like, why did they never teach me to do my taxes or balance a checkbook but I learned how to
Right.
sew.
Sure, right. I don't know. It's not the point of our industrialized school system. And that's another rant we could have. Just start me talking about all the ranty things. Let's talk about universal healthcare too. That'll get me going. Sumesh or Joylene, anybody that you can think of. And the reason I'm asking this is not because I want an answer, but because I want you thinking about it. So.
I'm thinking of my daughter to start with.
Yeah.
I see that whatever a lot from her right now in the recent past.
How do you mind if I ask how old daughter is?
She's 12 right now.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Once they're past about 8 or 9, they're pretty good about, you can fold some of these things, and so 12 is perfect. Jaylene, you're muted. Okay. So if it's okay, I'm gonna give choice. Is it okay if we kind of transition into some housekeeping stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, so first I'm going to put into chat my calendar. So you can pop yourself right in my calendar. These are 1 hour blocks. My assumption is for people who are not in Pacific Standard Time, Sumesh, that it just automatically adjusts to you. If it doesn't seem to do that, please let me know and we'll find some other way to do this. But so that comes along with the conversation today. And it's a really good time to refresh and kind of go over stuff and to get really specific on who you're serving, your life, that kind of a thing. The other thing I'd love for you to do is to fill out this quick exit slip. The exit slip is how I develop new courses and how I shunt off some ones that haven't worked so well in the past. So feedback is really critical. As if I remember correctly, it's anonymous. So please feel free to do that. By close of business tomorrow, if I can get YouTube to cooperate, I'll send you this recording and I will send you the companion notes as well. I'm trying not to be super disrespectful of your time, but I am working on a gigantic, massive project, which is a tool that groups and communities, advocacy groups, nonprofits can use to help those that they serve pay off their debt stupidly fast. Like I'm getting goosebumps thinking about literally taking debt payoffs from like 20 years down to like 7. So it's a community building practice. It's a changing how we talk about money tool. It's debt killing all at the same time. Normally when I am developing a new tool, I have clients that I can practice on, but because this is a group sort of thing, I don't have a group I can practice on, especially multiple times. So I'm going to send along with the notes and the certificates, write down certificates. I'll send along the invites for this. It's not open to the public. I'm looking for community leaders like you for this is an advisory committee. So you're going to help me build this tool. And then in return for helping me build the tool, you get to use the tool. So I'm really excited to get some data from you guys, get some input from you guys about how we can help those that we serve pay off debt. Like bananas, it's so cool. Sorry, I'm getting excited. I get a little worked up. Okay, so I'll send that along to you. I can stay as long as you guys want. I'm not going to kick anybody off this call. Is there anything that anybody needs clarification on?
Yeah, and I need to get a review on that cycle once again, but what I'll do is I'll listen to the recording, then I'll get back to you if I need more clarification. Yeah,
and I'll try to cap out the slides and put it in the notes as well. Put slides in notes. Yeah, the slides don't translate super well because of the stupid animation, but I'll put the slides in there as well. Yeah. What other clarification do you need, Sumesh?
Yeah, just that. Yeah. So yeah, once I go through it, then I've got the link, and yeah, I'll book for an appointment to just to run you through.
Yes, please. Yeah, I look forward to that.
And you said a half an hour appointment that you wanted with us, or an hour?
It's that scheduling bot is set for an hour, but if you can only do a half an hour, then let's do a half an hour. So, but it's
Okay.
set for an hour.
Because earlier I had scheduled an appointment with you before you put that on there, and it only had a half an hour slot. And so I was just wondering if I should try and go and
That link that I sent
right
you
after
was,
that time.
you could do that. Yeah, that link is for an info session. The half an hour, that's for folks who's considering working with me, and I'm considering working with. That would just sort of put our heads together, but we can combine it all together, I guess. So easy peasy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Jessica, what do you need clarification on?
No, I think it's pretty clear. I tried to take some really good notes. And then, like you said, I'm glad we'll have that follow up of the video and the other notes. Also, if you could just create like a giant poster that I could have on my wall where all my clients could see it.
Giant
you know,
poster.
yeah, just so it's a visual. I could get like a little laser pointer and go through all of that. No, I'm excited. I'm excited to
Pin the
see.
tail on the cycle.
Yes, I'm excited to catch some of that language and try and kind of ease my way in and find someone who's willing to listen about the whole cycle, who isn't so deep in avoidance that they're like, I don't want to talk about this. But
you can ask permission in a way, like, okay, so let's pick on avoidance. You've noticed that avoidance language that I'm just focused on, and you can, like, I just noticed that you said something that means that you might be experiencing some avoidance. I have a tool that might help with that, or at least help sort of illuminate that. Would it be okay if I shared that tool with you? And most of the time they're going to say yes, and then you can teach them the procrastination cycle. If they say no, of course, like they might have too much on their plate right then to deal with, but you can don't be afraid to like call it out in that like, I recognize that it sounds like you have some avoidance going on in a I'm not mad at you. You know, of course, it's okay. You can build like the micro intervention in there. It would be weird if you were not in avoidance right now, right? And then I have a tool that some people have found insightful. Is that okay if I share that with you? So you can, and because we all work with different populations, like it's your sensitivity to that. You are the expert in that. I don't get to tell you when is the right time, but more often than you probably think, you'll be able to ask permission. So
yeah, I've found in the past, it almost seems like when they're laying on all that shame, that's when they're kind of open to like somebody, you know, the idea of somebody saying, you know, that you're not to say you're wrong, because that's not going to help, but to hear that shame and go, no, that's you're feeling that way because of all of this. And I just feel like that's kind of a good, they're vulnerable enough at that moment that they're willing to kind of listen and have someone who wants to, you know, listen to how they're feeling. So
yeah, you could pull off of what they're saying, like it, or you could like still tuck it in your brain and just cold ask, I'd like to share a tool with you. Is that be okay? And they're probably going to say yes. Then you can share the crisis cycle and then ask them where they think they land. Like you can use that as a jumping, whatever you're hearing from them, that indicator is a jumping off point. You can include that in your pitch, because that's what it is, or you can just offer the tool. And sometimes they'll say, what's this about? What's this tool about? I'm like, just an awareness tool. That's it, because it is, right? Just being aware of the crisis cycle, so, or whatever they call it. So yeah, the sales pitch to get to a tool is less, that transition is less problematic than we think it is, right? That like I'm going to teach you something now. You would also work. Not super, doesn't really respect anybody's autonomy, but like the delicacy around that transition is not as delicate as you think it is, because they are not listening to us. And I'm not saying that they should be hanging on our every word. They're not listening to us because they got crap ton of stuff going on in their head. So I think that the consent piece, the permission part, is probably more important than anything. Is it okay? Is it okay if I share a tool with you? Is probably the go for it. I mean, the hesitancy around that, is the hesitancy around that transition about respecting the person, or is it about like, what's the hesitancy about?
It's mostly trying to find a time when they're open to it. But I guess at the same time, like you said, if we know there's so much going on that they're not listening anyway, as long as they say, yes, I'm comfortable with you sharing this tool, then really it's just the beginning of the conversation that we'll probably go back over 10 more times.
Right. Yeah, I love that you're focused on that for them. But yeah, there's never going to be a perfect time when they're perfectly receptive to that. If they were, they probably wouldn't be sitting in front of you. So I have like a weird, and this is my rule for Hannah. I don't know if this is duplicatable. So let's say I'm talking to someone, we're working through the goal setting strategy, and I hear at one of those enemies come up 3 times. Goal setting strategy be damned. We're talking about the crisis cycle. So we go right into that. So whatever I thought was the plan for our session today doesn't freaking matter. Like if I hear someone like bringing up that shame, if I hear it 3 times, I'll pivot. So and because they don't know, right? They don't know what you had on your brain to talk about today, right? Sometimes I'll tell my clients, oh, today we'll probably be working on goal setting, and then we make it 15 minutes in and we're talking about something else entirely. That's okay too. There's no wrong way to do that. So they don't have any expectations. So, today we're talking about resilience, and tomorrow we're going to talk about tracking our spending, and they don't have that. Maybe they do. I don't know. I think people always expect me to hand out budgets. Here's your budget. Bye. Have a good life. Samish?
Yeah, for me too, like at my workplace, like I have a really nice team where I could use this too, both for individuals who are unable to meet goals, as well as help my managers who handle teams, give them these goals so that they can use it in their review meetings in order to, if they see that there's a gap and there's this team member who is going to procrastination, I can see a great way of tying this as part of the feedback mechanism and how they can use this as a way to help the person reach their goals.
Yeah.
I'm like, my mind is all right now the ideas of how I could use it.
Oh yeah. No, we've been talking specifically about this kind of the service world, but this absolutely translates well into the organizational world too. Yeah. And I like you talking about systems. I'm like, oh boy, I love that. Oh yes. Now this is definitely it can be really transformative for I hate to use the word, for like productivity and efficiency. So understanding that. So neat.
And like I already have 3-4 people with whom I want to share this tool with, and I'm thinking opening up my calendar, giving some slots up, saying, hey, this is my calendar, like how you did it for me, just show them. And
yes.
Have a one-on-one conversation, then have some follow-ups. I can really see the way this can change my team's.
Yeah, that's exciting, because like this doesn't do any good if it's just the 4 of us talking about this tool. It's not gonna. It's not important. It really only works if we are teaching it and reteaching it. That's what, like, in the nonprofit world, like I rarely work with the people that the nonprofit's serving. I'm teaching people like you, and then you guys go out and amplify it, and then I get all excited.
And Hannah, I have a question there.
Yes.
Like, do you think this is better? This works better on a one-on-one section, or do you think you should do it like a group session and then open up on a one-on-one in a calendar?
I find it works better because I do it both ways. Like literally, I'm doing it that way right now. It depends on who your audience is, right? I think if it's leaders, you could probably teach this to leaders in a group setting, follow up with them like we're doing. And then they can reteach it out individually. When I am person to person, it works really well. Teaching it one-on-one or one-on-two if I'm working with a couple. It just kind of depends. It also, the marketing on please come to the procrastination class, not super good. Everybody's like, no, I'm good, thanks. No, right?
For me, that's an easier challenge. Like, I just have to tell them that, hey, have one session, and they are all like, okay, I'm in. So like I can tell them come in. So I don't really
That's right.
require them.
I'm going to remove your autonomy. Yeah. Yeah. That's
more like it's a push from my end.
Yeah, that's a push. Yeah. It depends, right? Like bringing someone into a group class where they don't really have to share too much of their own information, where they can just kind of internally get it and then follow up with single sessions. That works pretty well too. But right, like I think it works more. It has to be fitted around who you're working with, also the time involved. Like, and that's kind of the difference between like compliance and competency type training. The competency comes in sessions like this and one-on-one. The compliance checkbox went to procrastination class, happens in those large group sessions. But I think well done, they can be pulled, you can combo them. Because everybody, if they're keyed into this, needs to have some time to sit down and sort of work it out with another human being. It's really difficult to process through this whole thing individually. It's possible, right? But this is a connection thing. So wonderful. I'm putting into the chat next month's Train the Trainer. Fits right in with what we're talking about today. I called it Breathing Underwater. We're talking about how to help people who are actively in crisis make better decisions. Can you guess what some of the things we're going to be talking about? It's a good partner class to this one. It's not going to be a duplication of it though. So it's digging deeper into some of the things that we've talked about today. And of course, I would love to see you all there. Wonderful. Anything that's rolling around in anybody's head that we need to? We are at 2 hours, guys. This tells me that I need to begin scheduling these for 2-hour blocks instead of 1.5 hours. So, okay, we evaluate the system, not our own, not ourselves. So, wonderful. What a good class. Can anybody think of good reflections that we could ask each other? That was cheating on my part. How about if you had to tell someone what this class entailed in one sentence, what would you say? It's a good homework question, it looks like. You're muted, Samish. I saw this. I got excited.
I'm sorry, I have to be animated by nature.
Please. As I am too.
So there's so much to it, right? It's hard to just concise it with one line or one marketing line for it.
Yeah.
Like
the elevator
word
pitch.
procrastination and action to it is there, but so if I'm able to even look at it, then already the procrastination has stopped.
Yeah. Yes. I like that. Yeah. that might be a good way to present it to the folks that you work with. Yeah, because then it's one of those things that we don't talk about very much, this particular topic. So go ahead.
If you procrastinate, join in or something like that.
I thought about so many different ways to make a joke out of it, because I like jokes, especially bad jokes, but I've never quite been like, don't put this off. Like, oh, that's so cheesy. I've like 4 people didn't come in today. So like one of them is a long-term client of mine, and I can feel very comfortable like, did you put off coming to the procrastination class today? But that's not going to be cool for everybody. So yeah.
Keep procrastinating or
reply.
joining.
And I was like, I'm going to mess with her and be like, that sounds like a lot. Could we maybe do it another day? And then I thought, no, I'm not going to do it.
You could. I'm okay. Wonderful. Well, like I said, I don't kick anybody out. I will let you leave as you need to, but I literally can talk about this with you guys all day.
All right, I'll wait for your email, Hannah, and then I'll sign up for the follow-up class.
Yes, please. I look forward to talking to you and really digging into this with you, Sumesh. That's going to be awesome. So, yay.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's 2 at midnight here, so
Oh, that's right. I'm so sorry. Please go to sleep.
Bye.
Good
Bye,
night.
Hannah.
Good night.
And then, Hannah, on one of your classes, there was a certificate given. Is there certificates for classes as well?
Yeah, I'll do the certificate. I don't do certificates for the discussions. I do it for the classes, but yes, I will do that. Bye, Jessica. Bye, baby
Bye.
Cameron.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon. I'm going to sign up for the next one.
And then a 1 hour talkie talk.
Sure.
Yes, please.
I figured, might be for people who can afford the money on it, but
No, I mean like the 1 hour session that comes along with this class.
oh, okay. Yeah, I thought that was for people who paid for it.
That is what I said at the beginning, but now I'm saying something different because
I know,
it's
because
going
then
to sound
I'm like, I know I can't talk Polk County into paying for it because they're just,
meh.
kind of cheap.
No,
that.
yeah. Don't worry about that. That was never going to be. It was always going to be available to everybody. That is me running an experiment on marketing.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, I'll look at your calendar. I also was telling my coworker Cherie that I think you met for a short time about the class. She's got a very in-depth case right now she's dealing with, but I know she was interested in doing some of them coming up too. So I might just train her, use her as my guinea pig to begin with.
Absolutely. Sit down. We're talking. Yeah, please.
I'm going to teach you a tool.
Yeah,
Awesome. Well, it was so nice to see you. I got to feed this little